How many Zoomers to be on?
Ten.
All right, welcome everyone to the regular monthly meeting of the Board of Commissioners, held for the purpose of transacting the general business of the township. Today's date is July 12th, 2023. Meeting is being held in the Springfield Township building. It's also being offered in a live streaming feature via Zoom. The meeting will also be made available on the Township's website beginning tomorrow morning. Comments will not be accepted remotely during the meeting. Instructions for submitting public comment in advance of tonight's meeting were provided as part of the posted agenda. One thing about the Zoom, we're having some issues with our camera, so the camera feed is coming in through a laptop. So if you're at home on Zoom, it may look a little different, but I think you can hear us. Craig, if someone has an issue, is there a waiting room?
Yes, I'll be checking that.
Did you have to go to that laptop to? Mike Taylor, if you could summarize any public comment received prior to the meeting.
Sure. Since Monday evening, when the board last met, there have been 8 public comments received via the public website. 7 of those comments were regarding the Halls Lane settlement agreement that the board will consider later this evening. Of those, they were generally opposed to the development of the remaining portion, but appreciated the board's efforts to preserve the 2.75 or so acres of open space. There was one other comment requesting a copy of the single-use plastic bag ordinance, which was accommodated.
Great, thank you. Please stand and join the Board of Commissioners in a moment of silent reflection on the servicemen and women who place themselves in harm's way or to preserve our safety at home and overseas. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time I would entertain a motion dispensing with the reading of the minutes of the previous meeting is written and recorded in the official minute book of the township.
Like that motion?
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Please record a 6-0 vote.
Yep.
Okay, we have a compliment with the exception of Commissioner Standish this evening. I would also like to announce that the Board of Commissioners conducted an executive session as part of its July 10th, 2023 workshop meeting to discuss 1 personnel matter and 2 litigation matters. In a second, we're going to get to the public portion of the meeting. However, I do know that many folks are here and interested in the settlement agreement proposed resolution regarding the property of Halls Lane. So I do want to give just a little background to help frame that. I know this is a project that's been up for debate and tons of meetings for several years now. So I'm not going to get into the full history that has been spoken and written about that. A lot of people have heard about that. If anyone wants a little more detailed history, I have several writings on that previously. I'd be happy to share. Anyone can email me for that. So I just want to just go over a little bit of the more recent history and hopefully we'll give some structure to the public comment. So many folks may have known that there was a litigated but approved project plan for 107 unit assisted living facility on this tract that was never built. But this current iteration really started with this current developer in 2019. And the first iteration preceded many of us on the board was a proposal for a 100 unit apartment building. This was in the summer of 2019. And that was ultimately rejected by the board. The property is currently zoned for institutional use, so residential, with the exception of a couple houses, is not permitted. In 2020, at some point there was a potential institutional use that fell through. A lot of things fell through in the COVID period. Developer came back to the board with another residential proposal that started with a 41 townhome development proposal that was ultimately rejected by the township. There was more back and forth. The number got down to 36 at some point, I believe. There may have been some discussion about getting to a number below that. I don't think it ever got below 30, if I recall correctly. So, and that was ultimately rejected by the board. There was a lot of community meetings. There was a lot of input on that, which basically brought us to December of 2021, which was the end of that portion of the discussion about doing a residential development there. And ultimately, the board in December 2021 rejected it based on that number. So anyone can look at the video of that meeting, read the minutes of the meeting. I do remember the hybrid solution of some sort of public-private partnership to use some for public, allow some development there, really hadn't come up yet. And in fact, in my comments at that December meeting, I remember saying that, I desired that some kind of compromise could be there, but it wasn't in the cards. And the talks kind of stopped there. The developer indicated they're going to go back to find an institutional user. And at some point, we were informed that there was an institutional user under contract for the property. So spring of 22, that was going on. People were still giving feedback about that. Commissioner Ratzenbein, probably because she was a new commissioner, was not as beaten down by the talks about the property, going on and on and on. And she, infused some new optimism. So let's keep the dialogue going. Let's see if there is here that could be more of a compromise for this site. So we reopened the dialogue in the spring of 2022. So it's important to know, really, there's 4 outcomes for this site. I wrote on Monday a little bit about it, and I mentioned that there's two major alternatives to what we're talking about tonight. And the third alternative was that larger residential, but really there's 4 outcomes in terms of what the township can do or should do. First outcome is do nothing. And I know there's some people in our community that said that's the best way. We could do nothing. So the site is institutionally zoned. The owner of the property can develop it with an institutional use. They can find a buyer, or they can develop themselves, or they can submit a plan. And we can look at that plan, but if it's by right, meets the zoning, there's not a whole lot we can do to stop the use. Nor should we. I mean, your government shouldn't say, I just don't like it. It meets the code, but we don't like it anyway. So that's not really, we want it to work. So the first option was to do that, let that play out. Whether an institutional use was ever built there or not, you might be skeptical, that's fine, but it's an eventual possibility that it's there. And I will note if it was an institutional project there, all the concerns that have been recently talked about development would have been amplified by a big factor. Institutional allows up to 40% impervious coverage. And as I said Monday night, a lot of the trees that we're saving now that we believe, would not be. So that was the first option. The second option really was for the township to buy the entire parcel, whether it's through a friendly sale or a condemnation. And ultimately, that was discussed, that was debated publicly and privately, and ultimately the board did not have the appetite to do that. And I will say that that project is probably going to factor 4 times the cost to do that. It's not just the cost of the fair market value, it's the cost of potential litigation. It's dealing with the existing buildings that are there. The township is not in the business of being, residential landlords. Buildings are outdated, and ultimately designing and constructing the park. So you're looking at just kind of rough estimates that we did over $4 million. So in comparison, that's 22% of our annual operating budget. So it's not a small number; it's a huge number. And if folks think that we should do whatever we should to preserve this land, and I get that, it's a fair point of view to have, but just understand that we represent and try to represent the entire township, and that's a big number. It's a big number, and it's ultimately paid by the taxpayers. So that's not something the board had the appetite, certainly not majority, to make that happen. So that was really the second outcome. The third outcome, as I mentioned, allow a larger residential development. There were some people that were fine with that. Doesn't cost the township anything. It's better than institutional. There's housing crisis. We need housing next to a school. We'd rather have houses than that. Fine. That is fine too. But there was a lot of people opposed to that. And if you're worried about traffic and stormwater, cutting down trees for 16 townhomes from less than half the site, and 30-some townhomes from the whole site, we would have amplified that much more. The fourth outcome was where we are now, which is some sort of, call it a hybrid, call it a compromise. Let's use some public resources to preserve what we can there. There is a lot of old growth there. But at the same time, allow the property owner to develop the property and have something in his budget. So there's really the four. No matter how you feel about any of them, I don't know that there's more. And each of those has details that you can test or chime in on, but ultimately, one of those four outcomes is going to have that problem. So, and we explored them, and we debated them all. We heard public opinion on all, and you know where it came from. Spring 22, as I just mentioned, with Commissioner Retzenbaum helping to reignite that dialogue. The sides got closer and closer in that dialogue throughout last year, and got close enough that to talk about a real resolution. Okay, here's something that's not going to make everybody happy, not perfect, but it's going to be an outcome that a whole lot of people could live with and be better. So that led us to the vote in September of 2022, September 14th. We had a resolution that contemplated condemning a portion of the property for $1,050,000 for a majority of the site, and laid out in a way that would preserve the majority of the trees. With that compensation and with the outcome that 16 units would be favorably viewed upon in terms of zoning for the remaining parcel. So that vote happened in September. Technically, I was a nay vote. My line in the sand was fewer units. I wanted a little more time. Because real estate negotiations can't be public. It's not the best interest of the public for one side to be negotiating publicly while the other one's private. So after years of going through this, it seemed like it came real quick. So I did advocate for additional month, whether it's other people fundraising for what they wanted to do, just get some more public feedback. But the structure I did support, and I actually advocated that this outcome would be pretty good. So even though I was technically a neighbor, I was still supportive of the concept. So it did pass. I think it was 42, and basically that solidified in good faith that this is what we can do. That we're going to condemn it. It's going to get the developer out of the existing contract. We're going to preserve most of the site for the use of a passive public park that saves as much of the trees as we can. That's going to give the developer an opportunity to have a feasible project with the remaining parcel. Now, I would note, and we actually can pull up the graphic if there's specific questions on it, but we designed the taking the split of the parcel in a way that we have the majority of the site. It's in a way that preserves as many trees as possible. The portion that the developer retains is where the majority of the dwellings are. Not everyone knows that there's 5 dwellings on the property now. There's buildings on the property. There's driveway in. There's a heavily compacted driveway, or rather parking lot back there that's impervious. So the development is really going to happen where those improvements are. So it's really going to, of course, some trees are going to come down there. There's going to be disruption, but it's minimized by the way we did it. Initially, we wanted to have the park next to the school because it just kind of made sense that way. But 2 things made us flip it. One is what I just said. We can preserve more trees, have a better park. By doing it the other way, And the stormwater management actually worked better than the way the site sits, so it'd be harder to do the stormwater management for the residential part of that. So that's what that was. That was a vote in September that basically solidified in good faith. This is the agreement. I sent out an email 2 days later to my email list. I posted on Facebook, basically with my explanation of my vote, and I thought about it and confirming that it was in fact good faith because we're going to allow 16 minutes there. So from that time to this time, a lot of things have happened, mostly just administrative stuff. We actually had to legally file the condemnation. When the title report came back, there were a lot of issues, just easements and right of ways and that kind of stuff that we had to like work through before you want to actually, finalize the filing. So we finalized the filing. There was, engineering of the site, more detail how it's going to be. The developer filed an objection to it, which was expected because the eminent domain is really just taking the property and saying, here's what we're giving. But it doesn't go into the zoning of what's left. So without that piece, there's no compromise. Because the value that, the portion that's left is now a 2-acre institutional zone piece. You can't do anything with, right? Because you need at least 3 acres to do anything institutional. So that's what we have today. We have a settlement agreement. We took a portion of the property based on, here's what we agreed on. Well, you can't just do that without giving me zoning relief here. Okay, let's negotiate a settlement agreement. So the settlement agreement is up for vote tonight as part of the agenda item is that settlement agreement that says that. So again, it's not perfect. I don't know that everyone's jumping for joy, but it's a pretty good, decent outcome considering the 3 alternatives of that. So we can make the merits. Certainly, anyone who wants to speak and have their voice heard, give feedback. If you don't like it, it's correct. That's cool too. But I just want to give you that background, how we got from there to here. And I know people feel like that it comes out of thin air, and it really does. I mean, I tried my best, and I can probably blather on when I send these long emails, but I've done that to try to be transparent with folks. So, having said that, I think that's where I'll stop on that. So at this time, the board is now open to comments or questions from the public. The board draws particular attention to those items listed on the agenda this evening. Please be advised that once the committee reports begin, the board can no longer accept questions from the floor. At the conclusion of the committee reports, public comments will once again be accepted. However, official action of those issues listed on the agenda will have already taken place. Therefore, if you wish to comment on an agenda item, now would be the appropriate time. If you do come to the mic to speak, please start with your name and address.
Hi, I'm Mike McCann. I'm at 208 Suffolk Road, right here across from the development. I have a question and a comment about it. The question is, how do you get from the current institutional zoning to change it to, I guess, residential, right? You would need to change it. How does that process work? What has to happen?
I don't think we are changing that.
We're not changing the zoning. The use that is inconsistent with the current zoning is permitted by the settlement agreement. And that's why even if the board votes to, if everyone signs a settlement agreement, you still need the approval of the court. Because there is a use to be permitted on the property being retained by the property owner that is inconsistent with the zoning that's on the property.
Okay, so the court has to approve it.
Right.
Does the zoning board, what do they call it, the zoning committee, do they have to approve that as well? Or no, it's just the variance or something?
This board has to approve it.
One second. Okay, all right. So then the other question, I'm sorry, I'm sure you guys have gone on this before, is aren't you essentially condemned, it's not the right word, but making it so that the dialysis facility there, I mean, they're eventually going to come and ask for the same thing, right? I mean, if you give this variance, a variance, just a little flavor, you give this variance for this use, You have to give that to them when they come and say, hey, this is my golden parachute, and I want to build 16 townhouses here, correct? Do you
No,
have
sir.
it?
There's no precedent factor in Pennsylvania zoning whatsoever.
So by changing that, they can't go to court and say, hey, they just did it right here, now they have to do the same. thing.
Anybody can go to court and say anything they want, but the fact is, the law of Pennsylvania zoning is that there's no precedential factor whatsoever, no matter what you do. Not that it won't be raised, I'm sure someone might raise it, but it's not binding at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And it's a little different too, in that adjoining property is an existing institutional use with improvements, so. Whereas the subject really is a couple of dwellings, but it's mostly. An area. So, one thing I forgot to note, I do want to make sure at least initial comments are limited to 3 minutes each, just to give people a chance. If everyone has spoken who wants to speak, and you have something that's unduly non-repetitive, not repetitive,
Something
then
isn't.
yes, then certainly feel free to come again.
So it's Alexander Klinger, 7811 Elm Avenue. Been working on my computer all day today, haven't spoken much. I have a question about the zoning also, or the non-zoning. So this does not come before the zoning board at all.
Correct.
So this vote by the board. And then now, when does it come before the judge? Because Susanna was saying that was wanting to share the timeline of this process. Right, like,
I'm sorry, I don't know who Susanna is. Oh.
Commissioner Rothbaum, excuse me, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just-
Susie. Susanna, Commissioner Rothbaum was gonna share the timeline, and maybe you could help let us know that if you pass this tentative plan right now, that when it's gonna come before the judge.
Yes, I think I can. I think there will be an immediate petition or application to the judge saying that we've had this discussion here this evening and outlining some of the facts that Jim already went through. And the judge will be asked to approve the settlement agreement, but first decide whether he or she wants an additional hearing or an additional opportunity. And if they do, then there'll be another hearing, but it'll be in Norristown. And if they don't, they'll just approve it.
Disapprove it. And is there any recourse by the community if we feel there's undue stress upon the neighboring the neighbors about this zoning change? That's not a zoning change.
I think the neighbors always have recourse. Whether or not that recourse would be successful is another thing altogether, but there are many ways in which.
Can you give one example of a way?
Well, one thing, just to note to your first question too, this only affects the zoning, right? So if there was a project that met zoning already, we would go to this process. So the full.
No, I'm asking very specifically about this case, no general questions. Okay.
Under this settlement agreement, the applicant has the right to try to convince our zoning board, if they wish to do so, that the remaining property is still used for an institutional use, and because of our condemnation, they should be entitled to what's called a variance that the other gentleman mentioned. That would have to take place on the 2 acres, and with the townhouses that you know about that are in the agreement, we're fairly confident that the owner of the property is not going to do that. But they have the right to go to the zoning board and ask for.
No, yeah, but like Mr. McCann and other neighbors might, what about them?
Well, you asked, do they have recourse? And I answered, yes. They can
Okay.
go to court and say
Okay,
whatever they want.
all right, well then, I'll just quickly say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, use too much time here, but it's very confusing and it's a big implication. And it shows me, that how huge this is. This vote is huge. When you look at what has, the township, the board has worked hard. We appreciate your efforts. And they were good efforts to put, why it had to be a 16 townhouse development, but to put a 16 townhouse development at the what looks like the best place. But this was done with zero environmental, ecological input. We had no experts there, signing a confidentiality agreement, helping these confidential negotiations. And now you are voting something that hasn't been seen by anybody that knows something about trees, knows something about vernal pools. On Monday, when you asked me, you asked us like what we wanted, like what our outcome we wanted. And, honestly, the outcome I want is for the entire property to be protected. And, but that's, because that's who I am and I care about it. And so, but in answer to what we want in postponing the vote is that the board can bring back some environmental safeguards to this agreement. There's nothing in there about that can be brought up to the planning commission. The current saldo does not have any protection, doesn't require pervious paving. We don't need use of an ecological or environmental urban planner that can help minimize the tree loss. We need strict stormwater requirements.
I do need to ask you about that.
Okay, and in addition to sustainable constructions. So the I really hope that you also have said that you feel like people have had enough time to give their comments, but you haven't given enough time for yourselves to consider these comments and have an open mind, and maybe somebody has a good idea that can improve this agreement for all parties. You have heard nothing from the public until now, and then to have a vote minutes later after hearing these comments shows a lack of good faith in governing and your community. So that's fine.
Thank you. One of the first questions, it was, what you talked about recourse for residents in terms of the zoning. Yes, this sets in place the zoning. However, the applicant will still need to go through the full land development review process. So this is by no means a final design. They still have to abide by the stormwater requirements, they still have to abide by landscaping requirements, street trees and all that kind of stuff. Goes in front of the planning commission. So there's a whole process that any development goes through, whether they need zoning relief or not, and the public will have a say in that as well. Yeah.
Samantha Kuhn, 31 Springfield Avenue in Providence. You did mention it has to go through certain requirements, and you kind of touched on the points that you mentioned about that you have a tree waiver for the replacement of any trees. Well, if that becomes part of any formal requirement, why is that considered part of the agreement?
That is part of the zoning requirement.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, it doesn't mean they don't have to plant the trees. They still need, like I said, to do their service. Trees and landscaping they have to do. But the way we drew the line, so to speak, to take the part, we squished them as much as we could to maximize how much of the existing trees we can save. So 16 was the number. That was the compromise. By the way, I'm not taking your time. So
No, it's fine.
but we drew the line as tight as we possibly could. So to the trees that will have to be, it's not just not feasible to add 2 trees from each. It's just not feasible, so. In the negotiation to make the line as far as possible, where the compensation was, that was a part of the compromise, not to be.
And I think I remember being at one of the meetings where you had mentioned, if they can't replace the trees there, they would like sponsor trees that, some other development, I think it was, they sponsor trees or plant a tree somewhere else in the township. Is that something that you're considering?
It's something you can do from time to time. It's not required in our code. Like a lot of townships will have a fee in lieu of tree replacement. But again, there's one piece that was part of the negotiation, part of that compensation.
And then one other thing is that the encroachment on the protected land, about the, parking lot. Could you give a little more detail of whose parking lot that would be, who's right, who would have the right of use? And,
You mean the small parking lot for the park?
if that is a parking lot for the park,
Yeah,
if it's
so-
not for the parking lot that would be on the land would be ours, is that correct?
Correct, and I think we contemplated having like a locking emergency gate there, so that you couldn't drive from
Okay,
the development. So it is, so that is meant to be a small parking lot for users of the park.
and is,
And one of the things we stipulated agreed upon is that the developer is paying for the cost of installing that and some other
is
items.
that gonna be impervious land?
We don't, I mean, we stipulated it's paving, we have consensus to do something different. Most expensive in there is paving. That's what it is.
I see my concern is that it believes the pervious where we want the storm water and everything to go.
Well, it's gonna be impervious for us. It's got a park first. And, not.
It might be saying wrong for that. Okay, well, either way, who is, ultimately, they will be paying for the installation of it, you're saying, but we would be required for the maintenance of it.
Correct.
Okay,
Right. At the end of the project, it's a public park, owned, and, maintained.
thank you for your time, and I appreciate all of you working as hard as you have. We really do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Name is Zeta Cross. I lived in Erdman for more than 20 years. And I also want to thank you because I know that you have spent a lot of time and and done a lot, and that you care about the environment as much as the opponents of this house development do. And I just want to acknowledge that. But I do think that you got outfoxed by a developer in the negotiations. He's a sophisticated buyer, knew the property was done institutional. He tried multiple times to bring institutional projects that were not suitable for the neighborhood. The neighbors objected. He can't, he doesn't have a valid institutional project to bring to the table. So what I mean by being outfoxed is that was your leverage. That land without the zoning is worthless to him. So what you need, so anyway, so I think that there's no reason that we have to have townships, townhouses. Because his hands were tied and you represent the neighbors. And I think that you're bending over backwards to make him happy. Well, this project will save a lot of trees. It will doom the vernal pools and the robust ecological habitat that they need. Because at a minimum, they need a no disturb zone of 200 feet. The EPA recommends beyond that, 1,000-foot buffer, because that's where the frogs, salamanders, crustacean shrimp, the many insects and creatures that live in vernal pools spend the warmer months when the pond evaporates. So it's a given that if the townhouses are built, adios to the vernal pools. A pristine Marston Woods would benefit every person in the township. Right now, the township is planning to build a multi-million-dollar bingo or pickleball or basketball or recreation center. And I am not anti-recreation, but I don't play basketball and I won't be using my building. And many people won't, but everybody will benefit from the, having a pristine 4.7 acre plot of woods that I talked before about. It sequesters ozone, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide. 4,000 gallons of stormwater a year are held and processed through the trees. But anyway, long after the recreation center is obsolete and some of us are dead, the woods will be there to absorb stormwater and do all the things that we needed to do. And the world's on fire. And I just think that with many other sites in the township, this developer could use, I think that it's crazy not to save a small parcel.
Maybe we can wrap up.
Springfield Township's two main parks are almost all turf grass. The Carson Woods is a living ecological habitat. I suggest that the developer build his 12 townhouse, give him 2 acres of the Flower Town Country Club site. I've been a real estate agent for more than 20 years, and high-end buyers for township, for those townhouses, don't want to be in a modest little burg in Erdenham. They would love to be by the golf course, at the country club.
Thank you.
Just want to respond, just for 1 second. Just wanted to respond very quickly to 3 points on that. One is, if the township got outfoxed in this agreement, that would be my fault and not their fault. That's my job. So I hope I didn't get outfoxed, but we'll see. Number 2 is, just as recently as this week, the developer agreed to work with our township engineer to do more than the ordinance requires on stormwater management. And number 3 is that if the property owner could prove, as you folks have all suggested, that the property has absolutely no value for institutional zoning, they would be absolutely entitled to a variance from either our zoning board or a court for what use they could establish as a use that gave the property some value. So the fact that, or not the fact, the allegation that it couldn't be used as zone is leverage for them, not for us. So that's something to think about, because they could go in and ask our zoning board for 60 townhouses. They could ask, and if the zoning board denied it, they would appeal it, and we'd be in court forever. But if you folks are right,
I think you just buy.
well, I realize your solution to that is
Put the
that
boogeyman out there and you just say, oh dear, the boogeyman's coming, you better build 16 $800,000 townhouses.
my point is simply that they could, if in fact the property, and this is true, you and any other property owner in any township in Pennsylvania, if you can demonstrate that the piece of land you own can't be used under the existing zoning, you may ask, and you will ask, for what does that value under the existing zoning? And we don't know what that would be, but that is something that I'm sure that the owner of the property has considered. So that's another reason, if you will, for the agreement that we're talking about this evening.
Hello, I'm Terry Hefner, 121 Pause Lane. I've attended several of these meetings, but tonight I've prepared some comments. I'd like to begin by thanking the board in your consideration of the voices of community members who want to preserve Parsonwood. I know that many of you have given this topic considerable time and thought, and for that I thank you. However, even though much progress has been made on this plot of historic forest, having gone from the threat of institutional development to a 100-unit apartment building, to now 16-unit townhome development, I still would like to voice my concerns and urge you to vote no to the current proposed agreement or to delay the vote so that additional changes can be made. I'm asking this board to think and govern boldly and not just get by with the status quo. You have the opportunity to make Springfield a leader in land preservation and in making ecological decisions that benefit the true public good. I hope that in a time of clear climate change, where in the past week the world has just recorded several of the hottest days on record, that you believe that a several-acre plot of forest can make a difference. I know that others have previously referenced Dr. Doug Tallamy, renowned ecologist and environmentalist, and I want to reiterate that it is his position through his research that each one of us in our own small backyards can make a difference one by one. So if I can make a difference in my little 0.28 acre suburban yard, surely the township can lead by example and make a difference with several acres. I urge you to not leave any stone unturned and optimize every environmental advantage. We are looking to you to take that lead. I request that the board consider putting into this agreement and future planning endeavors a goal of sustainable development at the forefront. Minimally, for example, to consider pervious paving options, stricter stormwater requirements, and efforts to reduce even more the loss of mature trees. Lastly, in addition to the usual financial advisors and attorneys who have distinct and very different priorities, I'm urging you to consult with environmental and ecological scientists on this and future developments. The board has the power to appoint someone with this expertise to the planning commission. Without the input of an environmental and ecological scientist, Springfield may be missing key opportunities with the current agreement. Personally, I'm not satisfied with an agreement that we can just live with, as I heard earlier in the summary of this topic. That's not bold leadership. Springfield can make a difference and can be a leader in this venture. So commissioners, you have a choice to make. And in that choice, you will show the community your priorities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Only because I don't want to miss the chance later, I'm just kind of the same argument I'm making with you. Atlantic 518 Kersey Road, Orland. If we don't do it now, we will miss the opportunity and we will never get that land back. Everyone's told you the value of it. I know you appreciate that yourselves, and we're voluntarily surrendering something I don't think we need to surrender. And once we do, it will be too late and then we'll be sorry. So please, as they urged you, forward thinking is worth investing in it now. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tim Beckham, live in Erdenheim, 418 Greenway Road. And I basically want to confirm what the lady, I'm sorry, I didn't remember your name.
Sure.
I wanted to just basically confirm what she said about, we have an opportunity to be a leader, to be a massive leader. Because we can, even though there's just a few trees there, we can say to the rest of the world and to the rest of our country at least that we want to preserve what it takes to draw carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and to stop climate change for our children, for our grandchildren, for everyone. That's all I have to say. I have 4 grandchildren and I want them to live decent lives. And the only way to do that is to draw carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere because we put so much into it. We have to draw it out, and trees are one of the major ways to do it. Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Schulter and 463 Cravers Lane. I'm late to this. I live on the other side of Springfield Township. It doesn't affect me personally in terms of the drainage and the water, et cetera, et cetera. But I just stand behind what everybody said tonight so beautifully. I think, I appreciate your concern. I appreciate your leadership. But I do think that we have to step it up. You gotta step it up. I mean, there are fireflies missing. If you notice, there's less fireflies than when you were a child. This is not playtime. This is like this is real. And I think you guys have a great opportunity. I think all of us have an opportunity to show our children what, I'm an aunt. I'm sure you have children, but we've got to show people our hearts. We got to show what matters. This is not a bleeding heart issue. This is an issue of the environment. And I stand beside what all of these beautiful people have spoken about. And I just hope I hope you ask for more. I hope you want more than just 16 townhouses. I don't think it's about the townhouses. I think it's about the preservation of the environment, what that gentleman just said beautifully. It's about carbon dioxide. It's about species dying. It's not just townhouses, it's species dying, including human beings. Unless you want more. Otherwise, we'll just keep on going down the hill. So I vote for, take it into deeper consideration. That was my comment. Thank you.
Good evening, Angelina Banks, Queen Street. First, regarding the Halls Lane development, I echo the sentiments of my fellow residents that have been said tonight. I would encourage this body to vote against it. I find myself agreeing with people that I don't usually agree with, but when it comes to Springfield Township and where we live, I really feel that this body has the opportunity to be a leader and show that our township, how important the environment is. And this is an actual real decision that actually directly impacts now immediately our environment and the future. And so I just, would urge you to reconsider and maybe not vote on this today and really consider and maybe have another meeting where the township residents can be heard and not spoken at. My comment, going back to number 7, the single-use plastic bag. We talked about this back in October, and a lot of the conversation we had about this body said they would come back to us and they would look at the issue of the impact on the reusable plastic bags. It was brought up that they were actually more detrimental to the environment. This body said they would look at that, present their findings. Didn't know if we had done that or that had been shared with the community. Secondly, we talked about the unintended consequence of an increase in crime and theft. And I warned about that. A lot of places when they did ban single-use plastic bags, they had an increase of theft. And one of the next things that happened was then they decriminalized petty theft. And we see in Philadelphia that they did decriminalize petty theft, I think up to $500 shortly after the plastic ban bag. One of the big things about this was it was to combat littering. I think you can look at Philadelphia and clearly see that the litter issue has not been abated with the banning of single-use plastic bags. I think actually that has gotten worse. I think it's a great opportunity to appeal to our community to maybe get a task force for volunteers to help clean. Maybe the township can examine places where we have high incidence of litter in the plastic bags affecting our stormwater and maybe change the way those drains work or come up with a different way to prevent those plastic bags from causing a problem. I do think something that this body could consider because the way this is written, it gives you a year time before this would be enacted. And I understand that was because Giant Supermarket has a year worth of bags that they need to run through. And that's why the year in effect was, I think that's from one of the EAC meeting minutes. So that's why the year lead time was proposed. I think also one of the things that we talked about was the impact on lower income individuals, maybe not having access. And I think Richard Richard talked about, having a donation or a fund where people can pay into it and let people be given bags for free. And I just had questions about that. Is that something that if this ordinance does get read into, is that something that the township does want to continue to do? Then how do we decide who's eligible to receive the bag and first come, first serve? Different things like that. And is it the way it's written now, is that what you would read into advisement tonight? Or would it still be further edited?
Just being accurate, if the commissioners vote tonight on that subject, it is simply a vote to authorize it for advertisement for a full public hearing.
But as the way it's written now, or would it still be?
Well, if anyone doesn't like the way it's written now, they could bring that up.
There's two changes that are just made. One is put back in the fee for paper bags.
Right.
Which is 10 cents.
10 cents.
The second change is that you mentioned the 12-month, we actually rolled that back to 6.
Okay, the one that was on the website says 12 months.
Correct. So
And
that's a
then-
recent change.
Okay, great.
And there is a provision in there, so in the case you said of Giant, if the particular retailer has a big inventory, they can apply for an exception until their inventory is reduced.
And so what type of allowances are we making for our smaller stores? I understand we're, making a caveat to a large store, but there are a lot of mom and pop stores that would be affected by this. And I think the other issue was that while there was a small fraction of the township that actually responded, it was a large support for it. And so one of the things that we talked about in October was that they would reissue the survey to hopefully get a larger amount of people responding. I think less than 450 total responses out of a township of 15,000. So it almost plays into what's happening with Paul's Lane, that a lot of the township residents aren't being heard, or maybe don't have the option to be heard, or don't know how to be heard. So those are just some concerns that I have. And then also, there's things that probably should also change in this as well. So so a suggestion is show good faith that this township does want to see elimination of plastic. I would recommend banning the plastic political yard signs. I feel like they create division. I feel like that's a major problem with our stormwater management. Those blow in the wind and they're just ugly and they're eyesores, and you don't need this. So that's it. So thank you for hearing me. Thank you for my time. And I hope that you consider all of us equally, no matter what we're talking about, and that you really think about how we feel about all of the issues in our community and not just things that you agree with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Richard Metz, not Penn Lane. I just wanted to make one comment upon what the previous person, Ms. Banks, had said, with all due respect. I have researched whether reusable bags cause an increase in crime. And throughout the whole internet, there is one website, which is a corporate plastic website, which talks about that. There is no other study, there is no other information. So I'm not sure where you got that information, but I think we should dispute that information. There is no indication that Giant has years worth of plastic bags. I have spoken to Giant. Currently, they don't have paper bags, but the common length of time of 6 months has been done by all the other different townships. And that seems to be the standard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, how are you? Beth McNair, 1211 Greenville Road. I'm all about banning plastic bags, but my comments were also tonight. I just wanted to again thank board commissioners for your ongoing effort and attention to this issue. We've been talking about it for many years. And we're again tonight, but thank you for that. I also appreciate the nature of compromise and as such recognize that this is not a perfect solution for any party involved. It is, however, less offensive than some of the previous iterations. I truly believe that in 5, 10, or 50 years, no one in this room is going to walk by, including the developer, will walk past 16 townhouses and feel proud about this project. I stand by my initial belief that this was a missed opportunity and it lacks vision about what this community genuinely needs. That's it. My ask is that integrity is maintained in consideration of the settlement agreement that is upon us. I know this is not everyone's neighborhood, but it is my neighborhood. It is, this parcel is what I see every time I leave my house and into my entrance. It is inevitably where the water is gonna end up on my lawn. And we are really sick and tired of our street of cleaning each other's basements out in the middle of the night. In terms of the settlement agreement, please consider stormwater requirements that are above the bare minimum. Please consider sustainable building practices and consult an environmental expert in this process. Please consider the landscape design and the lighting, particularly facing Hawes Lane, that my neighbors will look at every single day. And again, as someone said, it doesn't impact them every day. This literally impacts every time we walk out of our house. This is what we see. And we've become accustomed and enjoy. And for many of us, why we bought on the street, because when you look, you see the tree line and you see a wooded area. And again, while I recognize that we are here in the midst of compromise, I'm asking you to really consider it like you live there. Like this is what you're gonna look at every day. Please consider the landscape and the lighting and maintain the integrity of our neighborhood when you're making the decision.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, how are you? John English, 603, John English, 603 Bradford Road, Berlin, PA. Neighbors, hello. I did read, this is regarding the plastic bag, the proposed plastic bag ordinance, and I have read it over. And I looked at some restrictions, and the restrictions state like fish, poultry, but they said nothing about people. And I'm just asking the commission to consider adding a no exception to that, just one exception, and that exception would be the elderly. I think we have an elderly population who built this community. Although some can get forgetful, some can get very stuck in their ways, but there's a lot who fought and died or fought to give me the right to stand here tonight. And I think that we need to take those people into consideration. It drove close to home last weekend. I went down, saw my dad's 85th birthday. He lives in Jersey. So packed the car, went down with kids. It was a good day. But we got there, and my dad's like, "Hey, Jack, can you give me a hand with something?" I said, "Sure." So he goes out, opens his trunk, and he has groceries. They're scattered in his car. He had no bag. I said, "Dad, what are you doing, Pop?" He said, "Oh, I forgot my bag." And it broke my heart. It broke my heart because it was a dignity issue. Because there's people who are too proud, or people that are so stuck in their ways, that this is the way they do things. And I really think that, we need to consider that. We look at it from another standpoint. I look at it from a sanitation standpoint, where if elderly people are living alone, they have these bags, and these bags are, it's an issue. I've taught safe start classes, I have certified instructors, I understand about pathogens, I understand about cross-contamination, I understand about roach eggs, and it's a real issue. These bags need to be washed consistently. If you're a caregiver, or even if you're that elderly person at home, you're not always going to remember, and the caregiver that's more out of work, and just take that into consideration, okay? The other thing, I just had a question. I noticed on the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, I noticed that there's a map on there. And did you know our township is considered environmental justice on that map? Because I have a picture of it. State website. You didn't know that? Oh, okay. That's a shame, because if you pass this bag ordinance, you could receive some grants. Is there any kind of grants or anything you're receiving?
Related to this particular ordinance?
Yes.
I'm not aware.
No. Oh, well, you should look into it. So, yeah, I read that today. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
start, man. Now. My name is Bill Sager and I live on. We're taking Avenue now just moved to Bethlehem Pike. And the one thing that bothered me for the 47 years I've lived in this area is floodplain. You have to figure your way around it because this, that, or that. Whatever's going on in which direction. Now you want to put more cars, more traffic on it. And that's all I can say is it's a bad move. We don't need more traffic. And I understand we can't get us, the state won't give us another light down there. Or you want to tell those people to wait in line just to get on the Hog Lane. There are ways around things, but building more houses and more cars is not good. And that's all I have to say. And I use my own bags that I buy all the time from Wegmans, and I'm 85 years old. Good night, folks.
Any other public comment?
Angela Banks, Queen Street. The other thing I forgot to mention is that one population that benefits from having, so when you don't have bags or when you charge for bags, the bagging function tends to be taken out of the supermarket. So you go to the town, the places that no longer offer plastic bags, and those bagging positions are gone. And so a lot of the baggers in our township, our major retailers, are neurodivergent population. So I feel like ordinances like this unfairly take jobs away from people who would have a task job like this. So I think we need to consider other unintended consequences. This is more than just about the bag in the environment. It's people's livelihoods. And I know, because I do care deeply about our environment, that's why I tried to come up with another solution in lieu of banning plastic bags that we could show, but this ordinance has so many other exemptions for plastic products. It just seems like it's not necessary, especially when 80% of the people responded to the survey already use reusable bags. I think it's unnecessary legislation. And like Commissioner Wilson said in October, that it's not the place of this body to legislate social change. And I think the EAC has an opportunity to add more education and again, to appeal to the nature of our community residents and have a volunteer task force and, have other options to mitigate our litter problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carrie Hubner, 121 Foss Lane. I have a question back on the Barstow. A year and a half of meetings and back and forth, and certainly it's gotten better. But in the meetings I've attended, I've never heard one person in support of the development, whether it's the 100 unit, the 36 unit, the current 16 unit. And I'm wondering how many people have approached you that are in favor of this current for any of these?
Well, I can tell you, you are right, that 99% of the comment is, I don't want blank. I don't want an institutional building, I don't want any development, I don't want traffic, I don't want all this stuff is true. And why wouldn't you be? I don't think anyone logically says, no, the trees are really nice, but I really like some of them to come down and have more traffic on us, which is already unbearable. So I think that's just the nature of it, but this is not a township project. It wasn't a township owned property. This is a privately owned project, whether we like it or not. So, and someone has a right to sell their land. Someone has a right, once they own it, to develop their land. So, again, we can't just say no to everything because we don't want it to happen. Full democracy. Property owners still have rights. Everyone has a right to do with their own property. I'm sure there's some property owners in the room right now. There's a zoning. There's zoning codes, zoning laws. You can develop your own property within those needs. Now, if you need a variance, you want to do something that's not approved by the code, then yeah, you need the approval and people can speak out. But there are certain things that, including what Mr. Gary mentioned about truly institutionalize their value there, there's legal routes for that developer to take to do something else. So this is not just a, yes, we like development, let's say yes, you know, it's finding a solution to something where there's not a direct solution, so. But that's, again, we were approached with proposals, and there was way more no's than yeses. To get to this compromise, but it's a compromise, and we don't have a compromise unless any parties in the compromise feel like it's a viable solution.
I mean, for me, the number is not zero, right? There's been a number of constituents who have come forward and said, please, you know, if we could preserve it all, that would be ideal, much to what we've already heard. But if it's going to be this development, I support it. There's certainly a number of folks that say.
And for the iteration of the townhomes throughout the project or throughout the parcel, which was more than a year and a half ago, there were a lot of people that came out in support of it. And that was in front of. Probably in the, well, I know for a fact in the planning commission, we were talking about institutional use. A lot of people showed up saying about that townhomes.
I think it's the lesser of two evils, and it's a difficult decision. But I think we overwhelmingly want you to think boldly, and you represent us, and this is what we're asking you to do. This is
What outcome would you, what can you give me an example?
In my comments, I want you to either say no to this, vote no to this agreement, or postpone it to implement some of the things, to give time, to bring in an environmental expert, which I think is what's lacking. Those of us who are opposed to this development, I'm not sure that we have thought of everything that could possibly be done, because we are not scientists. And the fact that the commissioners have not brought in somebody or appointed somebody to the planning commission is disappointing, that you have the opportunity to do that. I think that voice needs to be represented, and that's lacking here. So with postponing the vote or voting no on this current agreement, there's time to at least get an expert opinion to come in here.
It sounds like you're advocating for more time for discussion, and I totally get that. But what I'm asking is, what outcome would you see that is a viable outcome? Regardless, no matter what expert comes out and says, you shouldn't do this, you should do that. Again, it still comes down to what can legally be done if somebody owns property. So someone coming out and saying anything about the parcel that's going to be developed, it's not going to change what this someone does. So I'm just curious what the outcome is that we have, that you think is viable.
I'm not the scientist. I'm asking you to bring somebody in. Personally,
I don't know that the scientists that say what it's
I can only say personally, I would like the whole 4+ acres to be preserved. I know that's not up for consideration, but again, I'm asking the commissioners who represent us. This is what I'm overwhelmingly hearing from, the citizens of Springfield Township, and I'd like you to consider that tonight.
We have met with the TCNR a number of occasions. Our engineers gone out to talk about stormwater issues, surely. Right now, there is no stormwater management right on the property at all.
Correct.
Zero. So there's no modern stormwater management, but with the advent of this potential solution, there would be. DCNR advised us on a number of things, all the details, but certainly was taken into account in this discussion, in developing the plan or compromise, we call it. So it's not completely in a vacuum. Certainly we've had folks come out here and presented many ideas, ecological concerns that have been brought up. Those things have been taken into account. Don't you feel like they have not been? Even you coming here, I think, to Commissioner Lee's point, in an ideal world, yes, we would have all 100-year-old oak trees around us. That's not what we're looking at right now. So what can we do right now? And also, it's not our property. We can't dictate to someone, even if we were to and imagine a model, again, what is this model feature that you're imagining? Different style of home, I've heard, some people have suggested single family homes, those sorts of things. It's not necessarily, entirely up to us whether someone who chooses to develop is going to go that way.
Right, thank you. I will just reiterate real quick, the option of the township doing some way to acquire this from the previous owner in its entirety for a public park was very much discussed at length at multiple ways. So I do reject a little bit that to say that we didn't hear that part out. Like it was widely debated with a lot of public. And at the end of the day, there just wasn't the widespread support, not just from the board, but from the taxpayers who would pay for that.
Give us a little bit. Tell the taxpayers that you're gonna spend $3 million on a
I
rec.
can't hear you on the report. But we've been talking about this since 2019. So the idea that there wasn't an opportunity to express that opinion. It's just not true.
Samantha Coogan, from 31 Springfield Avenue. My concern is that this gets passed and then unfortunately, like people like me, I get busy and I don't necessarily hear about this from my commissioner. So I'd like, if this does happen, I'd like a more widely announced to the township. You should have most of our emails through our tax pay, like us paying taxes for you. You should have something in a form of being able to communicate with us through the Parks and Rec. Some sort of alert or announcement should be regarding this property. Hey, just so you know, this is going to be on it. And I understand that you can tell that you, like you said, resounding mostly no. I understand there's options where they might say yes. But we should really think about if you really want to hear that support from the township, here's your chance to comment and a more widely broadcast. Alex and some of the commissioners have been very good about networking that, because I knew without her, I wouldn't have made it tonight and I wouldn't have had my piece. And I appreciate you guys listening tonight. But yeah, thank you.
Ma'am, have you been on the website? You get the notifications from certain things. On the
So
website?
I get it for Parks and Rec. I've tried to get it for your website, but
There's like a whole host of options, you can opt in or opt out.
yeah, so I will try that again. But yeah, if there's a possibility for, obviously, this is a very adverse issue.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish that the owner would consider open space as a donation for the. And I brought her tonight because I just really want you to feel what your future effort or what your efforts could be gearing towards. And I brought her multiple times and she understands that this is fighting for trees. This is trying to fight for our last ditch effort of, well, maybe not our last ditch effort, an effort for us to save some beautiful, wonderful trees. She walked that property with me. So thank you. And that's my last comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to follow up the website, so you can sign up for planning commission, you can sign up for zoning. I know anything that's on the zoning agenda, we announced Commissioner Condes every month at this meeting, so all that stuff. You want to follow planning commission for sure, that's where a lot of it's going to come first.
Hi, Alexander Klinger, 7811 Elm Avenue. I wanted to say one thing about the price of the property. Halligan bought the land in 2019 for $1.49 million. In April 2022, the land was appraised for $2.5 million, and that was considered high by the commissioners. I'm not really sure I understand where the 4.5, the extra $2 million is added on for eminent domain. I also wanted to say something about the parking lot that is in the agreement now that says that Halligan has to build that. And I am against that in the agreement, that the way that the parking lot is where it's built now is there's looks like 4 or 5 trees will come down where you're going to bring in the driveway. And that's in our protected park. There's nothing in there about the driveway being pervious. And, there's also an access lane, and there's also a paved part, a paved pathway, which would be fine, but let's let the township take care of that and not let Halligan, who is not really going to his, he's building fundamentals. And it will be asphalt. We want to get our great expertise in the EAC and come together with a good solution. There's already 200, the township has already received $200,000 from Montgomery County. They have a grant in for $500,000 that there's no reason they shouldn't get from the DCNR, and they need to, you know, that we can use that money for the right reason and not have some ecologically incorrect thing. So that needs to come out of the agreement. There are 5 different things that are like, there's nothing stipulated about the landscaping. There's nothing stipulated about the pervious material. There's nothing stipulated about, you know, I go for a walk every day and I see there's 2 big houses that were built, and one of the houses has a driveway that was made too close to the tree. And it was stupid. And this big tree is dying. And the builders are gonna come in and they're gonna just do whatever they want that's cheapest. And, you know, there are property rights, but Halligan has the rights that we are giving him, that the township is giving him. Right now, he has the right for nothing, he's claiming. And you are giving him through this zoning ordinance, the right to build 16 townhouses, and you can make that happen exactly how you want. And as it's written now, I mean, it's not perfect, but there's ways to make it better. There's ways to make it way better. If we're going to have a 16 townhouse development, we want to do that as thoughtfully and as ecologically and environmentally correct as possible. To rush into a vote and agree it as it's written is wrong. That's it.
Thank you. Let me address just a couple of those real quick. A lot of the items that were mentioned there are not matters of zoning. So they would be there for any project, and they will be there for project, you mentioned landscape, under the full land development. They have to follow all the rules and regulations for that. So the matters that are limited to the settlement agreement are only matters that you would go to the zoning board of appeals to apply for a variance. So that zoning is taken off the table. They still have to do a land use application, go through the whole land development process for that. The other part of, you mentioned the price, I don't think that's accurate. There are 2 parcels, so you looked on public record at one, you didn't see the other. So the price doesn't.
1.2 million plus. One was 1.2 million, the other was 250.
I thought it was something that, but at the end of the day, that really doesn't matter. It's not our position to say, what did you pay for it? That's what we're gonna give you. It doesn't fall into this. It's what is the value of the property. We can't pay more.
It wasn't crazy.
As a,
April
excuse me,
2021,
please.
22.
As a public entity, we cannot overpay for a property. And anyone who's gonna be subject of an eminent domain is not gonna accept less for the property. And if there's a big delta there, it's gonna end up in court. So that's all gonna be ironed out. So I don't, I know the property was bought, I thought the number was a little high compared to that, but he was also bought without clearing title. And there was a significant lien on there, upwards of 250,000. So if you're looking at what you practically, if you accept that liability, you actually paid for that as well. So again, I don't care what they spent. I don't care what their holding costs were for the past 4 years, how much real estate tax they pay, how much they got into their architects and all that. I'm not rooting for anyone to lose money, but we're not making that judgment that, oh, let's make you whole. That has nothing to do with it. We don't look at that. We're doing what's in the best interest of the township. We're hearing people, you know, it's in the best interest of the township. So, but to just throw that out there that I heard he paid this, or why are we doing that? And it's the value. It's not really for us to decide.
Hi, Police Roll, 804 Fraser Road.
down the road from this. And I live directly behind the athletic field and Springfield High School. And I've seen a lot of development, a lot of extra lights, and a lot of trees and things taken down the field. And we've been flooded, so I know what this is like, and we have concerns about stormwater management, because we are at the low point, Port Fraser Road, it floods. So there's that, but my question, when I'm listening to all this, and I didn't get the beginning, so I might do a little. When you said there's no will to buy that property, for the township to buy that property. The school district spent at least $30 million redeveloping every inch of the fields behind my house, and that much more to do the one on Payton Mill Road. So if they can raise that kind of money for those fields, I don't understand why the township doesn't have the will to raise the money to buy that property. As it is, I get all your email. I look at all of it. And that question has never been raised. Do you support the township raising the money? I think it's fine what you want to do in terms of adding the athletic fields and the athletic building you were talking about earlier. I think it's going to be on Montgomery Avenue, if I'm correct. And we take care of all the other parks. So I don't know why you have the idea that nobody in this township would support more than that. You're accurate. Nobody wants more buildings. And I know that if you don't make a deal with the developer, it could get worse. I understand compromise. I understand what developers do. My old building I have to move is getting sold. So I know what this is like. But I really don't understand that point of view that you can't even try to buy that property.
I can speak to my own feedback from constituents. I think there was an overwhelming, not necessarily groundswell support to raise taxes across the township. For something.
How are you gonna build that rec center?
Hold on, when did you know? Who did you ask? I'm nothing in the email to me. Do you support us raising taxes or getting or putting out?
It's feedback that we received.
No, but that's not, that is.
Are you asking if I polled the entire township? Do they support?
You're talking word of mouth.
$1 million?
You're talking word of mouth. Here, every time there's a meeting, this place fills up with everybody in this neighborhood saying, we don't want this. You know how many lights I have on behind my house every night? I live behind a parking lot now. That's a whole other issue with the school, and working with the school can be very, very difficult. You think about more lights at the top of the block? You know what that does to the surrounding community, and lights 24/7? It doesn't make it a nice place to live.
Yeah.
Atlantic again, 518 Orland. I'm gonna try to wrap up with what I think is a lighter comment about the plastic bag issue. I don't have a lot of money. I drive an old car. I wear second-hand clothes, and I make great use of those trash bags. They line my trash can. They scoop up my cat litter. I have 101 uses for them around the house. So I don't have to buy them. So I am not in favor of banning them. Just weighing in.
Thank you.
Terry Kreiner, 402 Orland Mill Road, and I have a question and then just a quick comment. In the agreement, it says 3 parking spaces for every unit. And I believe on Monday night, it was said that the minimum would be 2. Can you go over why you offered more than what is the minimum, if that's correct?
Would you mind explaining that?
Yeah, so the township zoning code requires a minimum of 2 parking spaces per residential unit. In the current agreement, they're allowed to have one of those parking spaces in the garage. I believe they're going to be a 2-car garage, but in practicality, if you live with a 2-car garage, it's a single door, you really can't get 2 cars into the garage, particularly if you have trash cans and things of that nature in there. So in reality, only 1 car ends up being in the garage, and there needs to be a space for at least 1 in the driveway. But because they're a double wide garage, there's going to be 2 parking spaces out there. So that's where the 3 came from. And the 0.5 has to do with guest parking.
So the two are with the unit, not a separate.
In their
parking
driveway,
lot.
correct.
But then the other half,
The
another
half is,
8 spaces will be a separate little parking.
Well, still probably dispersed,
spread out,
you know,
dispersed.
like if you go in any house, go spots outside of it.
sort of guest park.
Okay, but it'll be separate from that.
It will be public park.
Oh, okay. Thank you. My comment is, I believe it was 2020, Winfield Audubon submitted a letter to the commissioners. And if there's anyone on the board who's new since then, it outlined what trees are on the property, what bird species are on the property, the value, as everyone has said, that you've heard, ecologically to keep, open space open. So I just was gonna ask, if you hadn't read that letter, or you don't remember it, to go back in your files and read it again before you vote. And just, again, postpone the vote tonight and just let some of this information sink in instead of rushing to it and agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eve Brothers, 1200 Green Hill Road. I just want to thank you guys. I know you guys have put, you all, everyone has put so much time and effort into this. I request that you postpone the vote and poll the township. You can't say that nobody's in favor of the tax raise because nobody even knows how much that tax is. And I know the risk of what might occur in that time, and I am hoping that and asking to have faith in the builder to do what's right for our township to, in the interim, and wait to see what residents and all the people want. If there's gonna be a tax raise, how much it would be, and that, and to have faith that the right thing will be done by the builder.
Thank you.
Rebecca Shock, 1105 Lane. I'm up here to, one, say that I'm all for keeping it as open space. I'm against the building 100%, and I'm here to represent the children that have to walk on Hard Lane. And it's like every single day, doesn't matter what time of day, Hard Lane is a nightmare to walk on. And it's a neat route to and from our schools for a lot of the neighborhoods in Erdenheim, in Flowertown, not just off Preston Road, we're going all the way down, almost to Bethlehem Pike. The kids are walking all the way along that pathway. And to add 16 new homes with at least, I'm gonna say 32 cars, if not more, on a regular basis, utilizing that space, it's terrifying as a mother. So please postpone this vote. Please gather more information. Thank you very much for all your efforts so far. And I really hope that the right thing does happen. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Oxbury from 1206 Wedgewood. I have a few questions about the Halls Lane topic. When was it published publicly and either available on the website broadly on the planning homepage or through the mailing, whatever systems that we have? When was the settlement agreement posted and the scheduled vote?
Posted on the website June 27th. It was letter was physically mailed to all homes within 1,000 feet. Which is not necessarily required, it's typically 500 feet. We did 1,000.
Yes, and I did receive that letter, and I noticed that the posting was, I received it while on vacation. So why does this follow a different variance than normal when it comes to things that come above before this body, where you have a month grace period? Why is this different?
The only things that we have a month are things that like ordinance by state law requiring a certain advertisement period. So for example, the plastic bag thing is an ordinance. So that is our vote tonight is literally just to vote to advertise it, and then that gets advertised for 30 days. And then ideally we would vote on that
Okay,
So this is not an ordinance, this is just a resolution.
a resolution,
So,
settlement agreement that has implications against zoning for institutional zoning,
correct,
which is different than ordinance.
correct.
Okay.
It's not.
And it was also mentioned that this is gonna go before a court as well after this vote, if vote is yes. And seems the assumption is the court would agree with it. What if they don't?
If the court says the agreement is not satisfactory, then we go back to the beginning, and the developer builds an institutional use on all 4 acres. Or sells it for someone.
Or you can, depending on why the settlement agreement is rejected. Change whatever those terms with objection.
Okay. And just gonna close with a comment. I've been living in my house for 6 years. Thankfully, I don't have basements with flood, but water flows down my street. Literally, storms, even if it's only half an inch rain, it's a river 6 feet wide in front of my driveway. So we just had it with huge storms, and if you take the 2 acres they have left, you think about, you get an inch of rain per cubic or per square foot, that's a gallon of water. There's 1 million square feet, that's 1 million gallons of water on a 1 inch rainstorm that's gonna flow down my street. So.
Just with regard to the water issue, I'm looking at the sketch plan, and it now has a gigantic stormwater detention basin right in front of Wedgewood Road. And the reason it doesn't have any stormwater detention whatsoever on it right now is because the property's never been developed. But the developer, the owner of the property still has to go through the entire township subdivision and land development ordinance and get the approval of the township engineer with regard to every aspect of stormwater before the plans for the townhouses could be approved.
And that I understand, but also it doesn't have any stormwater retention because it doesn't need it because it's development.
There are 5 dwellings on.
Correct, yeah.
Including a lot of impervious. Okay.
There's plenty of impervious and there's a lot of water. It's my understanding anyway, that there's a good bit of water flowing from other properties across this property that would be picked up by stormwater management that isn't being picked up today.
Okay, but it's not understanding that the majority of the property at the moment is not impervious surface. So
Correct. And it will continue that way, because the way we're preserving the park is where most of the impervious is not.
Okay.
Oh, and I just want to plug in for the stormwater management workshop that was done this past year in February, that could really highlight for you some of the stormwater, historical stormwater issues. So to Jim's or to Fisherly's point, that it's not exactly true, there are dwellings on there now that it's not because it's undeveloped that it lacks stormwater. It's because historically up until, and I learned a lot at the workshop recently, we're really required to do any stormwater, modern stormwater management, or any stormwater management, our engineer would say. And so if you just want to learn more, just a plug for those, I've heard the term mentioned a lot today. It's on the website, it's recorded, it's very informative and helpful.
Okay, thank you. This time we'll move to the.
I just wanted to say. Thank you. Including the last person. My name's Leah Blanton. I live on Fraser Road and my house stacks up to Harston Hall. We look at this beautiful oak tree every single day. And I'm just a little bit concerned and want to voice my concern about the zoning variance that would be a part of this decision. It's just worrisome being on Harston's doorstep. This significant decision would be made that could have very serious consequences for future development for this historic this historic property. And I feel like I just want to make my voice heard that it leaves Harston very vulnerable. And I'd urge you to please reconsider. It's like, if it's so easy to rezone, then, you know, we can all see the writing on the wall. And I think that's very concerning to all of us as residents. Thank you.
I have something from Ellen, she just texted me, her.
As long as it's not. Really,
Okay. We want, this is from Ellen Stevenson, she lives on Rose Lane. We want sustainable development, we want you as leaders to hear that and to find out what is possible before you take action. Mr. Halligan did not purchase a residential lot. You are giving him that while you are ignorant on the impact that decision will have on our future.
Okay, this time we will open up to our committee reports. Public portion is now closed. I'll start. I have 3 items this evening. First item regarding ordinance 974. I move the Board of Commissioners enact ordinance number 974 to amend the code of the Township of Springfield, chapter 107, vehicles and traffic, by updating a fee schedule for parking violations from $15 to $25 for most violations, by adding a new section that prohibits the use of unlicensed motor vehicles such as mini bikes, mini cycles, trail bikes, snowmobiles, all-terrain vehicles, golf carts, and similar vehicles on any street, sidewalk, public or private property. The proposed ordinance also establishes fines and authorizes police officers to confiscate tow motor vehicles that are operated in violation of the new regulations. That is my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Please record a 6-0 vote. Second item is related to the ARPA beneficiary agreement, Springfield Township American Recovery Act Plan Act, so known as ARPA. Spending plan consists of 15 projects across 4 expenditure categories, including vehicle, equipment replacement, parks and recreation improvements, environmental stormwater improvements, contributions to the 3 fire companies that will be used for the replacement of fire apparatus. In order to memorialize the township's ARPA contributions to the 3 fire companies, beneficiary agreement has been created to formalize the transactions by establishing requirements for record keeping, timeline for the dissemination of funds, and specified purpose of the contribution. Therefore, I move the Board of Commissioners authorize the appropriate township officials to execute a beneficiary agreement with Portland Volunteer Fire Company. Number 1, for the distribution of $150,000 of ARPA funds to be used for the purchase of a 2024 C-grade pumper. That's my motion. Is there a second? Second. Questions or comments? Now, is this the last one? The other
Last one.
The other Flower Town and Newmore have already been there, given their distribution.
Well, they've signed the agreement, but they'll get their distribution when their truck is delivered.
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Please record a 6-0 vote. Finally, resolution number 613 and 614 regarding public assistance designation agent. In May of 2020 and October of 2021, the Board of Commissioners designated Brandon Ford as the designated agent for Springfield Township to work with the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency to receive public assistance from the COVID-19 pandemic, damages sustained from Hurricane Ida. With the recent departure of Mr. Ford, the township's employee, it is necessary to designate a new agent to work with both emergency management agencies. Therefore, I move the Board of Commissioners adopt resolution numbers 1613 and 1614, designating Craig A. Louie, Assistant Manager / Finance Director, to serve as the township's designated agent, work with the federal and Pennsylvania emergency management agencies for disaster declaration number 4506 related to the COVID-19 pandemic, disaster declaration 4618 for damages sustained from Hurricane Ida. That is my motion. For a second.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Please record a 6-0 vote. That concludes my report. However, I'm going to read the report for Commissioner Standish as the chairman of the Community Development Committee. I think I'm not going to be able to talk. Okay, the first item regarding land development for the Murray Funeral Home, I move, that in compliance with section 512.1 of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, Board of Commissioners grant waiver to the formal land development plan review process in order to permit Dennis and Nikki Murray, owners of the properties at 1220, 1208 Bethlehem Pike, to construct 2 building additions, associated site improvements to their existing funeral home in Flowertown. Project includes the removal of a 535 square foot section of open porch area and the construction 2,262 square feet new building, along with parking, stormwater management, and lighting improvements. The waiver is conditioned upon the following. 1, a stormwater management plan is submitted and approved, the condition satisfactory to the township engineer. 2, landscape plan is submitted to ensure compliance with the township code. 3, a 6-foot high solid vinyl fence is installed along the shared property lines with the residential properties on Franklin and Jones Avenues. 4, a shared parking agreement with St. Genevieve Church and School is submitted for review and approval by the township. 5, the Jones Avenue entrance driveway is designed to prohibit right-hand turns from the property. 6, signage be installed at the Jones Avenue driveway to read entrance only. 7, pedestal lighting be installed in the new parking area to limit light intrusion on adjacent residential properties. 24. And finally, 8, in exchange for a waiver to the landscape buffer requirements between the properties at 1208 and 1220 Bethlehem Pike, the 2 lots shall be consolidated into 1 parcel. That is my motion. Second. Questions or comments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Please record a 6-0 vote. Last item is regarding the condemnation settlement agreement for 380 Bus Lane. At the September 14th, 2022 meeting of the Board of Commissioners, the board adopted resolution 1575, authorizing the condemnation of 2.7598 acres out of 4.518 acres, property owned by 380 Hawes Limited Partnership, and located at 380 Hawes Lane, Erdnot. After resolving a number of title issues on May 15th, 2023, the Office of the Township Solicitor filed a declaration of taking for the condemned portion of the property. The condemnation created a subdivision of land which reduced the overall size of the property retained by 380 Hawes LP to 1.6902 acres, together with an adjoining property at 402 Hawes Lane for a total of 2.0202 acres. On or about May 18th, 2023, 380 Hawes LP filed an answer to the township's declaration of taking, alleging that the township's condemnation action and subsequent subdivision of land rendered the remaining lands owned by 380 Hawes LP completely valueless for any of the purposes permitted by the township zoning ordinance, and demanded that the township pay damages for the fair market value of the entire acreage of 380 Hawes LP properties. After extensive negotiations, a tentative compromise has been reached to avoid additional litigation associated with the condemnation. Following is a summary of the material terms of the proposed settlement. 380 Hawes LP agrees to accept $1,050,000 as full and fair value for condemned land, and both parties agree to mark the condemnation action as settled, discontinued, and ended at the conclusion of their respective duties under the agreement. The township agrees to allow the land that is not condemned by the township to be developed for 16 townhomes subject to a plan and detailed specifications set forth attached to the agreement. The township further agrees to process the townhome plan expeditiously and with certain minor, usual, and customary waivers of the township subdivision land development ordinance. If 380 Hawes wishes to pursue the 16-unit townhome plan. We will be obligated as part of the public improvements under the plan to install one, a paved walking trail through the condemned land in the location designated by the township. Two, a paved parking lot for the public use of the condemned land in the location designated by the township. And three, an emergency access driveway to the adjoining parking hall property. Hawes, 380 Hawes Lane LP agrees that the existing curb and sidewalk lien on the condemned land and the land subject to the settlement agreement shall be paid in full upon the earlier to occur of 2 years from the court approval of the agreement, where the date that the settlement land is transferred to a third party. The township's lien shall remain upon the portion of land that was not condemned until such time. 380 Hawes shall reasonably accommodate additional stormwater management related to rain control and cooperation with the township engineer during the land development application process. Therefore, I move that the Board of Commissioners authorize the execution of a settlement agreement and mutual release 380 Hawes LP in order to settle any and all disputes associated with the condemnation of a 2.7598 acre portion of property located at 380 Hawes Lane, Urban, being a portion of Montgomery County tax map parcel number 52-00-08452-00-9 at the time of condemnation. That is the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Well, I'll just quickly say that it's been a long process, a lot of conversations in this room and other rooms, people's living rooms. It all hasn't been easy, but I think it's worth it. And I just want to say the people that really care about the environment, they care about our township, care about the neighborhood. I can just say that I know I have, speaking for myself, that we've heard you. And nothing would make me happier than a legacy than to save as much as possible. I truly do that. When I said we didn't have the will, pretty big commitment to try to take that kind of private property in a township of our size. So I think this is a decent outcome. As I said earlier, I was technically named in the vote last September, and that vote really put in place the agreement. So I understand people may be coming late to this and feel like they're not heard. There's a lot of discussion leading up to that. At the end of the day, we're a democracy. It was a 4-2 vote. I respect the will of the board at that time. I think it's a decent outcome. Not perfect. And I am glad that there's going to be a point there. And not everyone's perfectly happy, but you are. Any other comments?
Well, I just want to, I feel like Jim said a lot, and I don't think it's unfair or I think it's a little unfair to do all of him to say all the things, but I do appreciate everyone's advocacy, and it's, but for your advocacy, perhaps it wouldn't even be this far, and perhaps it would just be the outcome that he suggested, where there was a do nothing outcome. And so it's not that, please feel that you've been heard, even if you may not feel that way, you know that you have been, and I think this is what we can achieve this time. I did have a couple of general things, which is one, definitely I've heard the term stormwater a lot. I do recommend that workshop to learn more about how it operates, what the system really is. I learned a lot. I learned that if it just looks like water on your property, that may not actually be a flood by their determinations. There's a lot of things, fine details to know about that. Also, I know there's kind of this overarching concern about the trees, and I wanted to ask if, like Taylor's been really sharp about explaining things like this to me, if you could re-explain what tree replacement is versus buffering trees for the benefit of the public.
Sure. The township subdivision and land development code talks about tree replacement at a rate of 2-to-1 when you take out a tree of a certain size caliber. That's separate obligation than landscape buffering requirements that are required in order to buffer incompatible uses or adjoining properties from one another. It's also separate from the street tree requirements that a developer would be obligated to put in. It's separate from any of the other parking lot or interior landscaping requirements. So there will be a good deal of landscaping that would be required as a result of the development.
So all that to say that we're going to hear a lot more about this, should the developer choose to proceed with the 16 townhomes at the land, in the land development process. And some of these concerns I heard, I think would be appropriate there, or even more effective there. So just a reminder to all of you. So appreciate you coming in here.
Any other comment?
I'll just say real quickly that I'm going to oppose this vote tonight, and it should have been consistently opposing it throughout the process, and mostly because I just think that this gets us into a difficult precedent as far as getting involved in these property transactions. I do hear from residents a lot outside of traffic issues and stormwater issues. It's being priced out of living in Springfield. And we have a fair amount of residents that are on a fixed budget, and they have seen their expenses across the board, whether it's, you know, food, taxes, home, going up significantly. And you know, these are residents that have been in Springfield for decades and are just simply being priced out. So I am exceedingly sensitive to the burden that we do put on our taxpayers. And as Jim echoed earlier, and I, you know, throughout the course of this debate years now, have heard everyone who I've spoken to and everyone who I've listened to in this room and outside of this room. And it is a tough situation. And I go back, you know, even further to sort of when Jim was giving the rundown to, you know, when this property first changed hands, and it was owned by a widow who was left in a tough situation with a sizable property, sizable tax bill, that she was having difficulty moving. And, you know, in this country, it's life, liberty, and property. It's one of the main tenets of life in this country. And sort of her ability to be able to sell that property for value to get out of a very tough situation for her and her family was big. And I think that anywhere along the way, had we had a different developer, or even if, you know, at some point this developer decides to pass on this to another developer who isn't from this township, we're not having this conversation. They're doing a project by right, and this conversation and fight is being done elsewhere. The fact that we've had this conversation, this fight so publicly for so long, you know, I think speaks to the nuances of this project and the nuances of this particular this challenge. But at the end of the day, I've just been reticent to get involved at a cost to the taxpayer in this project, particularly when I have a sense of other projects that are on the horizon, other properties that have the potential to fall into private hands for development, and the impact that, you know, the decisions we'll have to make at that time. And as Jim pointed out, I mean, we are a township of very, very limited resources with a very small commercial base where almost the entire onus of our budget is for residents. You know, unlike every other township around us that has big corporate parks, big shopping centers, we don't have that. And so it sort of makes that question was brought forward too about soliciting, you know, are you willing to pay higher taxes for this project? All right, we can ask that in a vacuum, but are you willing to do that at the same time that we have ongoing litigation with the tank car purchase? We don't know what the final price of that's going to be. Are you okay doing that where we also have potential within 5 years paying you know, significant contributions to the cleanup of the Wissahickon watershed? Are you willing to do that at the same time that you know, Carson Valley property might need to be sold, a parcel of that for development of residential housing, and we won't be able to do anything for that. So putting in the context, I think, of of the potential cost we may have at some point. That weighs very heavily on, my decision to want to stay, out of this. I thought it was a warranted discussion early on about rezoning it from institutional to residential. Because it seemed like, particularly more of the residents who were immediately impacted by that had a inkling towards residential. But to go the extra step and then to say, we're gonna commit, $1 million to buy this parcel, I think that for me was where it just went too far. And it was not by lack of effort by everyone up here, a lot of people not up here, a lot of people out there, in terms of, reaching out to the school board, a lot of different parties trying to cobble together a coalition of groups that might be able to get involved. And they just couldn't happen. And so, I do wish that the tenure of the debate, I've said this over and over, that it didn't have to veer in such a negative standpoint. I mean, I think that we can talk disparagingly about probably any profession. But I know that, I know that probably everybody in this room really does want what's best for the community. We're going about it in very different ways. But I say all of that because it's a tough, nuanced situation, and it's not as simple as suggesting, right, we're going to raise taxes for this project. It's taken in the whole of a lot of the stuff that we have as a township that's on the horizon, and then even stuff that we just can't see underneath the water line. And that might be the scariest stuff of all. Makes it, just part of the calculation. So, yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Any other comment? All right, well, we have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
5-1.
I can't 5-1.
Please record a 5-1. That concludes Commissioner Stanley's report. We'll go to the Chairman of the Environmental Resources Committee, Commissioner Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a recycling report. I'd like to report that during the month of June 2023, Springfield Township residents recycled 165.3 tons of material with a household participation rate of 72.2%. The cost for the month was $25,287.04. Additionally, I want to remind the Board of Commissioners wants to remind and encourage all residents to practice grass recycling. Grass recycling is the practice of leaving grass clippings on one's lawn to naturally decompose and add nutrients. Grass is 80% or more water and highly enriched nitrogen content. Grass clippings easily break down and they return to the soil within 1 or 2 weeks. The clippings act as fertilizer, supplement, and mulch for your lawns. Finally, grass cycling reduces the use of plastic bags for disposal and reduces the amount of refuge that must be disposed of by the township at the present cost of $75.24 per ton. Sorry. My second report or second action here is an ordinance regarding the single-use plastic bags. I move that the Board of Commissioners authorize the advertisement of an ordinance to regulate the distribution of single-use plastic carry-out bags. The proposed ordinance would amend the code of the Township of Springfield to add a new Chapter 85 to regulate the use of single-use plastic carry-out bags by adding, finding, defining requirements, enforcement provisions, penalties, and exemptions regarding to the distribution and the use of single-use plastic carry-out bags. The ordinance includes a mandatory fee of 10 cents per bag to be charged by the merchants that choose to supply paper bags to their customers. The ordinance shall become effective 6 months after enactment. Copies, that is my motion. That is my, I guess that's my motion. I would also add that copies of the proposed ordinance will be made available for review beginning Friday, July the 14th. This week on the township's website, the Free Library of Springfield Township, and the office of the Springfield Township managers during normal business hours. So that is my plastic bag ordinance. I'd also like to just, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well said.
Let's
We-
take that motion.
I think we have a motion.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
I would just like to highlight again the extreme amount of work that your environmental advisory committee did with this ordinance. I think it's a very fair and complete ordinance. I would like to especially commend certain member Richard Haas, who was Metz, I'm sorry, Metz did a wonderful job on this. And I would recommend it to my fellow commissioners strongly.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Didn't Upper Moreland just pass one too?
I think they did.
Yeah, they do.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please signify by
I just want to echo that I would vote for banning the plastic bags without the fee component. We did work on this since October when it was first presented, and do want to echo those concerns then and still now, that it's not about the 10 cents at the checkout line, the $5 bag, it's the mental load of behavior change, as well as the cost of using alternatives to those with less than some of us here, and I have concern about that. Also, I don't think that it's necessary, and frankly, retail establishments can continue to charge whatever they wish, maybe even more than this, to meet the market as they wish, and I just don't feel it's necessary to legislate. So I would vote no on this, but only because of to advertise it with this 10 cent clause.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
Okay.
Please record a 4-2 vote.
And my last report is regarding the Environmental Advisory Commission. I move the Board of Commissioners appoint Gail Farmer, Flowertown, as the associate member of the Springfield Township Environmental Advisory Commission. Associate members do not have voting privileges, but are encouraged to attend and participate in all meetings of the commission and to assist with educational programs, research, and special projects. That is my motion.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Please record a 6-0 vote.
That concludes my reports.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. We'll go to the Chairman of the Public Works and Facilities Committee, Commissioner Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have one item this evening for the Shade Tree Commission. I move that the Board of Commissioners reappoint Tom Prisblinsky to a new 3-year term of service as a member of the Springfield Township Shade Tree Commission. Mr. Prisblinsky, new term of service shall expire July 13th, 2026. That is my motion.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Please record a 6-0 vote.
Next, I have an announcement in regards to the Shade Tree Commission. In a letter dated July 5th, 2023, Jamie DePaul announced that she would be resigning her position as a member of the Springfield Township Shade Tree Commission at the conclusion of her current term of service. During Ms. DePaul's time as a member of the Shade Tree Commission, she served as chair and vice chair and was responsible for revising and improving the township's memorial tree program. Ms. DePaul is also responsible for maintaining the Century Garden at Cisco Park and along with her family volunteers her time to border and landscape planters along Willow Grove Avenue. The board wishes to thank Ms. DePaul for contributing her time and talents to Springfield Township. With the resignation of Ms. DePaul, there presently exists a vacancy as a member of the Springfield Township Shade Tree Commission. The purpose of the Shade Tree Commission is to promote beautification of public spaces and encourage good planning and landscaping of private spaces in the township. The Shade Tree Commission is also responsible for coordinating the township annual Arbor Day event in April of each year. Springfield Township residents who are interested in serving as a member of the Shade Tree Commission are encouraged to submit a letter of interest or resume to the attention of Michael Taylor, Township Manager, 1510 Hickory Road, Winmore, or via email at ntaylor@springfieldmonaco.org. That is my announcement. I was also going to say a few things about Mr. Paul when I was done reading this, but seems like Mr. Taylor captured everything I was going to say in this announcement. So I just want to thank Jamie. She's done a wonderful job with Shade Tree, and she's a valued employee of the township area.
Did we miss from the commission? Thank you, Commissioner Maxwell. We'll go to the Chairman of the Administrative Fiscal Affairs and Zoning Committee, Commissioner Cobb.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, regarding the bill listing, I move that the Board of Commissioners approve the June check reconciliation in the amount of $982,428.96, and the July bill listing in the amount of $1,256,064.41. That's my motion.
The motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Please record a 6-0 vote.
Next, regarding the zoning hearing board agenda for the month of July. The zoning hearing board will meet on Monday, July 24th at 7 p.m. within this Springfield Township building, where they will hear the following 3 applications. The first application is of Kunal and Shradra Varia, who are the owners of the property located at 1715 Star Lane in Glenside. The applicants are requesting a variance for approval to construct a deck addition to the rear of the existing single-family dwelling that will increase the building coverage on the property to 18.19% of the total lot area, where the maximum permitted building coverage for this zoning district is 15%. That property is zoned within the AA residential district of Ward 7 of the township. Second application is from Alloy Wheel Repair, owners of the property located at 1123 Ivy Hill Road in Winmore. The applicant is requesting a variance seeking approval to install a second freestanding sign on the property. The site is limited to 1 freestanding sign not to exceed 25 square feet. The property currently has a 24 square foot freestanding sign for the existing daycare business on the site. The applicant proposes to install a second 24 square foot sign on the opposite side of the entrance drive from the existing sign. That property is zoned within the industrial and limited industrial district of Ward 5 of the township. And finally, the application of Michael DeLaurentis, owner of the property located at 2 Terminal Avenue in Ernheim. That applicant is requesting a variance seeking approval to install a 6-foot high solid fence along the property line adjoining Terminal Avenue. 6-foot high fencing is required to be set back 15 feet from any property line abutting a public right of way. That property is zoned within the B residential district of Ward 4 of the township. Copies of these application packets are available for review in the Community Development Office during normal business hours within this township building. And again, those 3 applications will be heard on Monday, July 24th at 7 p.m. Regarding the application for 2 Terminal Avenue, I move that the Board of Commissioners authorize the Office of the Township Solicitor to represent the interests of the board to oppose the variance requesting a reduction to the required right-of-way setback from 15 feet to 0 feet in order to permit the installation of a 6-foot high fence along the public right-of-way adjoining Terminal Avenue.
The motion, is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
These are 5.
And, Mr. President, that's my report.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll go to the chairwoman of the Parks Recreational Resources Committee, Commissioner Retzenbaugh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a motion and I have two motions today. First, concerning 1725 Walnut Avenue, I move that the Board of Commissioners appoint Orland residents Christine Hesser, Amy Jacoby, and Katie Whitmire to serve as members of the ad hoc steering committee that has been formed to create a site master plan for the former Tank Car Corporation of America property, 1725 Walnut Avenue in Orland. The steering committee will also consist of an elected official, a staff member, and 3 to 4 members of the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee. The committee will determine regular meeting dates and times that will be advertised on the township's website. That's my motion.
The motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Please record 6-0 votes.
My next motion is regarding resolution number 1615, Parks and Recreation Professionals Day. Since 1985, America has celebrated July as the nation's official Parks and Recreation Month. Each year, the Pennsylvania Parks and Recreation Society recognizes the men and women who ensure the parks and recreation facilities and programs are available to all Commonwealth residents by recognizing Parks and Recreation Professional Day on the 3rd Friday in July. Locally, the Board of Commissioners recognizes the importance of the township's parks, facilities, and recreation programs contribute to the overall quality of life in Springfield Township. Therefore, I move that the Board of Commissioners adopt resolution number 1615, recognizing July 21st, 2023 as Parks and Recreation Professionals Day in Springfield Township. We invite all residents to visit a local park or recreation facility to thank a coordinator, counselor, lifeguard, landscaper, coach, or other professional responsible for maintaining and promoting leisure and recreation activities here in the township. That's my motion.
The motion, is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments?
I have a question. At the beginning of what Susie read, it talked about it being every year, and then one specific date was announced. And my question is, do you intend the motion to be the 3rd, whatever it is, of July every year?
I'm gonna say we can make it reflecting annual, much what we did for May, and my note here is just this is reflecting our efforts to recognize our staff on a regular basis as we did Public Works in May, and we anticipate National Night Out in August.
Usually a national day that's set.
So the Pennsylvania Parks and Recreation Society recognizes it on the 3rd Friday in July every year. This resolution is a resolution of this Board of Commissioners, and it's just recognizing July 21st, 2023 as Parks and Recreation Day, Professional Day in Springfield Township. So PRPS did it for forever on the 3rd Friday of July. If the intent of this board was to adopt the resolution every year to call attention to this, we did it for this year.
Okay. Well, that's still my motion.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Please record 6-0 vote.
And that concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Commissioner Retzenbaugh. We'll now go to the Chairman of the Cultural Resources Committee, Commissioner May.
Thanks. I have no report this time, and I'm looking forward to going to the meeting on July 25th. Where I get to hear a whole lot. You know, it's nice to get right up here.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner May. This time, the board is once again open to receiving public comment. Do you have any more public comment? Most of the time, takers. Okay. Seeing as though we have none, then I would accept a motion to adjourn the meeting. Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments on this adjournment motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Please record a 6-0 vote, and that's the show. Thank you for coming, everyone. We're adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Very good.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Thank you all.